welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today I am so excited for this episode. I just had the most wonderful conversation with Sarah from Restfully Care. And links will be in the description. You'll get to hear all about it. We're going to talk about grief personas, because who doesn't love putting labels on ourselves? We kind of do, guys. We talk about the different types of grief personas, what they mean, how to interact with them. You can find out which one you might fit into and the differences between them and how they interact with each other. It was wonderful. And I always just love having conversations with people who are in this similar line of work with me, because we just kind of get it, right? We talked about the loss of our mothers. Anyway, you'll hear all of that. I don't want to spoil too much more, so please look forward to that. If you really enjoy this podcast and you want to become part of the Good Grief Society, there will be a link down in the description where you can join that. It is a beautiful virtual support group and community. It's not your run-of-the-mill support group. It's a whole community online for those who are suffering with any type of grief. You don't even have to be suffering. You can be joyful in your grief. It's okay. All grief is welcome. It doesn't have to be death loss. We'll have monthly grief circles. I'm going to have workshops and speakers. We'll have journaling prompts emailed to you for every day. You'll get an email once a week, not every day. We'll have a virtual space where you can communicate with other people and talk about this podcast, your grief, your stories. All of that is available to you. So if you go to the link in the description, you can also go to nikkithedeathdoula.com/podcast. There's some information there as well. So please check that out. Another great way to support this podcast is to go to patreon.com/nikkithedeathdoula. As usual, if you're a Patreon supporter, all of those funds I receive go to me providing pro bono work within my community, because I like to give back when I can. And I get to do that because of my patrons. So thank you so much. All right, enough of that. Let's dive into my conversation with Sarah from Restfully Care. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in again this week. I'm so excited to have a new guest with me today and have hopefully a fantastic, I know it'll be a fantastic conversation. I've got Sarah Baldwin with me today. Sarah, I like to let my guests introduce themselves so that they use the words better than I will use the words, because I'm not good with the words. So would you tell my listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sarah Baldwin. I am the co-founder and CEO of Restfully, and Restfully exists to help curate the best resources for people navigating end of life and grief. And therefore, we find some of the best podcasts, and I'm so thankful to be here.
Oh, shucks. I'm glad you think that. Okay, so before we dive into you personally, tell us a little bit more like what services Restfully provides and what that looks like.
Sure. So Restfully really came out of an experience where my mom died a few years ago, and I'm one of four kids. And she was diagnosed with cancer, and our lives were kind of turned upside down for about 90 days while we said goodbye to her. And after the dust had settled and we had had her funeral and all of that, a couple years later, I still was left with this aching, man, that there were parts of saying goodbye to my mom that didn't need to be as hard. I understand saying goodbye to your mom is maybe the hardest thing you could think of, one of the hardest things you can think of, but it didn't need to be as hard. And so we started thinking, if we knew all the resources that existed and we had frameworks for thinking about this, it could have been a little bit easier. And because of that, we created Restfully. And one of the really quick things we did within Restfully is we did a research project and found that people tend to grieve in 4 different ways. And so we embedded that concept of the grief personas into everything we do, so we can give custom advice and resources based on who the person is and what they need.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about the grief personas then. That's what I was so excited to share on this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited as well. So many people know the 5 stages of grief, and so it's different than that. It's more similar to a personality type, and where you tend to go to when you're in crisis or grieving.
Mhm.
And one of the early things I like to remind people is we're all kind of many different things, and no one really fits in any box. I think that's one of the best parts of humans. But
Yeah.
we break it into four categories. The open heart, that tends to be the most traditional, kind of what you see on TV, crying, finding
Mhm.
community, things like that. The steady hand, which is the grief persona that resonates with me the most, they tend to look for logistics, organization,
Mhm.
they're checklist people. The seeker, it looks for meaning in spiritual and religious frameworks, often to kind of ask the question, these big, what is this all about question?
Mhm.
And then the steady hand, oh, excuse me, the quiet anchor, they tend to process and grieve on their own with
Mhm.
their own kind of pace and their own place. And so those four different personas, how they interact tends to be really the intersection of a lot of conflict if there's a misunderstanding. And one of the really common ones is the open heart. I like to paint a picture of the open heart is sitting by someone's bedside, crying with them, really feeling these raw, big emotions,
Mhm.
while the steady hand is coordinating with doctors and logistics and hospice and planning a funeral. And
Yep.
there can be natural friction. The one person's thinking, why don't you care about this person the same way I do, come cry
Yeah.
with them. And the other person's thinking, who's going to help with logistics? And I think if we zoom out anthropologically, all of those things are incredibly necessary.
Yeah.
We need all, there's wonderful, wonderful purpose for all of those roles in a community and in a family. But if
Mhm.
we don't pause and you say, oh, that's this person is a quiet anchor. They prefer to be
Mhm.
alone. They might not want to come to this thing that we're having to honor the person.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that, then it can lead to conflict. If you do, then you can show up for others and you can get the resources and framework that would benefit you.
Oh, I love that. And I
Thank you.
read I read about those on your site before we had this conversation, and it was just and I think that's why I was so excited to share this. We all like to put ourselves into little boxes. We love to organize who we are
Mhm.
and put ourselves with little labels on us sometimes. And I've mostly been open heart, but thinking I was thinking about my mom's recent death when I read that, and my dad is very much a steady hand because we got home from the hospital at like 4 a.m. and by 7:30 he was on the phone calling this person, he was calling the attorney and making the
Mhm.
funeral, and I'm just like, Dad, let it sit
Mhm.
for a minute.
Yes.
That's how he is. He has to keep busy, and I know that about him.
Mhm.
That's just I've known that about him his whole life. And I tend to be way more the quiet anchor.
Mhm.
So it's just kind of fun to think about those things. But like you
Yes.
said, if you don't know those things, it can cause conflict, right? Because I could look at
Yes.
my dad and be like, don't you want to sit down and like
Yes.
cry? Or I don't know. Are you
Yes.
sad about this? You just lost your wife. But that is how he grieves.
Mhm.
Um, my brother died 11 years ago this year, and I mean it was kind of similar with that. He was very much uh my mom and he both really leaned into their religion, but he was very much like, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I have to do all the things
Mhm.
and keep busy. So
Yes. Oh, yeah, they sound amazing.
I
That's the
know.
other one with the seeker, the one that kind of tilts towards religion.
Yep.
Those people tend to say they're in a, oh, this person's in a better place.
Yep.
But to other personas, they're like, what, how could you say that to me? The
Yeah.
better place for me is next to me at the dinner table.
Yeah.
But to a
Yeah.
seeker, that might feel like a beautiful transition. And
Yeah.
so that again, there's all these kind of perpetual conflicts, and the
Yeah.
good news is there are patterns in those, and so we're working really hard to just
Hmm.
shine a light on the, hey, this is a really common pattern, this is a really common
Yeah.
pattern, here are some tools for that.
Oh, I love that. And, I appreciate you saying all of that because, especially the understanding of different grief types. I talk all the time on the show about not grief shaming and recognize that everybody grieves differently. Some people don't focus on the grief, don't think about the grief
Hmm.
till months down the line, and then it hits them. And we just have to, instead of judging people for grieving differently or not grieving the way we do, we need to just embrace that and work with them in how they work best, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, I love that. And judging ourselves, I've talked to people who said the tears just never came, the tears never came, I loved them, but
Yeah.
it just wasn't there for me to boo-hoo at a funeral. It's like,
Yeah.
look, you're dealing with enough. You don't have to do
Yeah.
performative grief
Right.
there's no right way, there's no wrong way.
Yeah.
You're just experiencing it.
Yeah. And your grief is yours. Like I say that at the end of every episode, your grief is yours. And it doesn't like, thank you for saying performative. It does not have to be performative. And
Hmm.
I've seen people at funerals who seem to like they have quote unquote have it all together and they're fine. Everybody's like, how are they not sad? I'm like, they probably are.
Hmm.
They're just not right now. They're
Yeah.
focused on this, or maybe I don't know. That's just how they're, it's yeah. So
Yeah, I think another really interesting one is an example for me is with work. At work, I tend to be kind of the quiet anchor
mhm,
because at work, I just need a little space. I want that. So, again,
mhm,
one of my hopes for the grief personas is it gives people the language of, I'm coming back to work, just so you know, I'm kind of the quiet anchor, which means I don't really want a big hug session when I
mhm,
return to work. I kind of
yeah,
want to just get back to my work. As this becomes more something I can talk about, I'll talk about it. But, having that language
yeah,
of this is how I am or this is how
yep,
I'm feeling can really say a lot without having to explain, I don't want to cry at work, or I do want to cry at work, or I want to handle this way or that way.
right. Right. Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that too, because having that language and having those conversations of this is what I need, being able to advocate for yourself too, like an
Hmm.
understanding, because you might have that person who's like, I don't understand why I'm not crying, or I don't understand why I am not, I'm focusing on getting all the things done and whatever.
Hmm.
To know that, and but then to advocate for yourself to say, now I know what I need and what to ask for,
Hmm.
and what is not going to be helpful to me at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we offer that on the website. Lots of, a steady hand really commonly needs help with logistics, but one of the common mistakes people will say to them is, "Let me know what you want me to do."
Oh,
And
yep.
it's like, just say, "Hey, would it work if I show up with dinner tomorrow for you?"
Yeah.
That really, really, really helps a steady hand, because then on their mental checklist, they can just say, "Okay, dinner tomorrow handled." And so
Right.
anything you can do that shows up for the people the way they need it, and then
Mhm.
asking for help the way that you want it or most
Yeah.
beneficial.
Yeah. 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 And I urge that too, because people come to me, they're like, my neighbor's wife just died and I don't know what to do or what to say. I want to help, but I don't know how. And the whole like, let me know if you need anything is always comes from a place of heart, but that puts it on
Hmm.
them to know what they need and then to ask for it. So
Hmm.
I love the offering practical support, but asking permission. Like, is it okay
Hmm.
if I bring dinner by tomorrow?
Hmm.
Can I take your kids to the zoo for the day so you can have some quiet time? Like all
Hmm.
those things, but ask.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just gonna show up with my lawnmower and like, I'm mowing your lawn now.
Well, you're always welcome over here.
That's my
Yeah.
love language is doing things for people. Like, I'm gonna go clean your bathroom, just sit down. Um,
Yeah. It's
so I want to
beautiful.
go back a little bit then to something you had mentioned earlier about when you started all of this, because saying goodbye to your mom was so hard. And I have found this too in the two big significant losses. I've had multiple losses, but I always afterwards find those little gaps in care, which is where I'm trying to squeeze in there too. So, what were some of the biggest gaps that you saw, or the things that were missing for you and your family that you needed in order to have a more fulfilling goodbye?
I think that's such a good question. I think for me, I experienced it in two kind of big ways, analogies that I can share. The first is it's drinking from a fire hose, right? It's
Yeah.
the internet filled with every piece of information we could possibly imagine, which
Hmm.
is fantastic if you have time to sift through it and dig
Yeah.
through it and find everything. And so that was one of the big parts where even in the stage of she's actively dying, you're
Hmm.
Googling death rattle. What is that? Is this it? Is
Yeah.
that it? Is this okay? What is this happening right the second? Is this happening this week? Or even anything answers and that could exist, they exist there. But when you're fatigued and you're in crisis or just massively overwhelmed and grieving or pre-grieving,
Yeah.
then it's just one of the things I always tell people is when that was happening in my life, I could basically only eat white rice with a tiny bit of butter or white toast with a tiny bit
Mhm.
of butter. And so I needed the internet is like a buffet, right? Of every
Right.
flavor you could possibly have. I wanted just a very simple thing
Mhm.
I could digest with the simplest words, with the simplest, that's what I needed. And so that gap for me was a really painful one because it was just too much. Everything was too much. Of
Yeah.
course, your mom dying is too much, right? It's kind of is too much, but everything else didn't need to be as much like that. And then I think my mom's one of eight, and they have
Oh,
a lot of
wow.
family members, and I'm one of four, so I have a lot of family members, and there are a lot of human, like there are, and a lot of people loved her. There are a lot of people, and I just think back to that time and feeling kind of frustrated with an uncle or frustrated with a sibling or conflict between each other, just thinking if we just had that, even the care support in the hospice facility and in the hospital, those people were different, right? Even the
Mhm.
nurses who helped, they had
Yeah.
different approaches. Some really want to talk about it, some were just kind of a little more reserved. And so
Yeah.
having a framework was one for me that really, like, the combination of drinking from a fire hose and
Yeah.
flying blind. It's just
Yeah.
a tough place to be when you're losing your mom. So that was it for me. How about for you? Was it?
Yeah. So, and I'm gonna mention a couple things about what you said too. The drinking
Sure,
from a
yeah.
fire hose is a huge, but and this is part of why I started doing what I do as a death doula, because there are people who are watching their loved one die and they're awake at 3 a.m. and they're like, "Mom's doing this. Is this normal?" You know, and you're gonna get 50 different answers, and they're all gonna
Yes.
be like awful because that's what Dr. Google does to you.
Uh-huh.
So to have somebody to just sit there and be like, "This is all okay. It's normal.
Hmm.
It's gross. It's difficult.
Hmm.
Whatever." So things like that, I really appreciate. So both of the significant loss I had, my brother and my mom, their deaths were unexpected and sudden. And with those, there's a lot that happens when someone dies unexpectedly. The biggest thing is all of the questions. It's overwhelming, and I just if I could have had somebody to like a second me to just be there to feel all of that, because I love how loved I am and how many people were there for me and how many people were reaching out to help and offering to do things for me and sending me gifts. But it was just a constant, what happened? Where was the, and like asking all the details about the death
Hmm.
that's themselves. And I really, that made me feel achy because I didn't want to answer
Hmm.
those questions
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
private. I mean, my mom had an
Hmm.
aneurysm. That's not that private, but still, it's like, I just sat through this. I don't want to relive it
Uh-huh.
again.
Hmm.
And so having those conversations over and over got so frustrating for me. But specifically with my mom's death, the squad was called. She went to the emergency room. They transported her to a different hospital. And the staff was lovely. They were there. Told us there's nothing they could do. And it was kind of like we had no direction. They
Hmm.
said, they talked us through the process of taking her off life support and waiting for her to pass. And then they said, take as much time as you need. And then they just all disappeared.
Hmm.
We were just in the room like, what do we do now? And I
Hmm.
know these things, but I've already been through this. So, finally I was like, we can just leave, Dad. It's fine. We don't have
Hmm.
to sign any
Hmm.
paperwork. But it's all those little, like
Hmm.
nobody was there to really nobody even gave us a pamphlet on here's some grief support.
Hmm.
It was
I
we're so
know.
sorry.
I
Bye.
know. And it's no single person's fault.
Right.
I really round up on people, and I assume that literally everyone who's working in healthcare intends to be generous with all of this. But I think there's not really, in a lot of life, you look, there's a place to look. And, when
Right.
you're applying to college, you go take a college tour and you go say, this is what this is like. Or if you're thinking
Right.
about moving, you go visit the town. The experience for us, I remember my sweet sister called and said, I just picked up mom's ashes on my lunch break. First of all, they are so heavy. Why didn't anyone tell me they were going to be? They just hand you this heavy box.
Yeah.
And then she lives in Houston, and she said, can I leave them in the car, or do I have to bring them into work? It's hot out. And I was like, I
Yeah.
think they're not, nothing really I think they could stay in the car. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's okay. And
Yeah.
you're just left with this confusing
Yeah.
thing that just feel, if you could be kind of, this is why I have so much. admiration for people in your role who are kind of linking arms with people who are doing this as just
Yeah.
I understand what's happening, I got you, I'll be able to
Yeah.
help, and guidance. It's such, you're really like losing
Yeah.
the horizon as a pilot, and it's
Yeah.
really easy to feel like you're imminently going to crash. So
Yeah.
having places where you trust the people to give
Yeah.
guidance is just such a
Yeah.
freedom that not everyone has. So
I
yes,
know.
the work is so special.
And then it's finding that balance between the fire hose and the complete lack of information, right? Because
Hmm.
you don't know. We're not prepared for death. We
Uh-huh.
think we are, but we're not. We know. Even I'm not. Like I was not
Hmm.
prepared for my mom to
Hmm.
die. And when I know all the things, I've been doing this for years, and I still was like, what?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, even if we are, we're not prepared. And we're not taught this kind of stuff. There's no
Hmm.
class on walking
Hmm.
somebody to the end of life.
Yeah.
And there's no class on here's what grief is like. We don't teach these things. So we're kind of, when we're finally faced with it, we're kind of just like, wandering around with our eyes rolling around our head, not knowing what to think or say or do. And
Yes, I know.
yeah, just to have some kind of central point to be like, focus, we're good. Here's where we are.
Hmm.
You're normal.
Hmm.
It's okay to wander around, rolling your eyes around because you don't know.
Yeah.
I guess okay. And here's what,
Yeah.
yeah,
I know. The other really kind of special thing that I've seen is just people are so people's experiences are so personal to who they are, right? And there's not really this framework for how does grief become who I am even after the loss, and how does that change who you are? I believe it changes you. I know it changes you because it just does. You never see the world the same exact way, but
hmm
that's okay. We change. We're humans.
yeah,
We do change. And
yes,
so I agree with you. Similarly, working in the space, I know maybe people who aren't will be disappointed to hear that even professionals working in the space are still flying blind and really like we're trying our best, but I know the space deserves no judgment.
yeah,
Everyone, it's a really human thing, and I'm very very passionate about it because in the world, probably no more, and at least in my lifetime, has it been more obvious to me that there's not a lot that we all have in common
yeah,
anymore, especially not in a lot of ways, politics, religion, all these things. But we do all have this in common, and how we face that can vary. But there's a rawness to it that
yeah,
really is the last thing we all have in common that I believe can be this heart opening unifier between us if
yeah,
we all kind of connect with it in whatever way feels authentic.
yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I appreciate you saying that even to those of us who work in this field sometimes are flying a little blind and we're human beings too. So
I know.
I just 2 weeks ago I had to go visit one of my clients was sent to the emergency room and it was the same one where my mom died. And I did it never dawned on because there's several hospitals and I'm in Columbus and there's several hospitals here. And but I'm driving there do do and I pull in I'm like oh, it hit all at once. I was like, "Oh no, can I do this?" I did. I was able to go in, but I had it took me a minute. It hit me real hard and because
Uh-huh.
I'm a human, I just lost somebody.
Hmm.
So anyway,
Hmm.
yeah.
I know these spots are, and I think that's one of the lessons in grief is that it really just is like rolling. Someone, oh, I forget her name, but someone wonderful framed it as it grief is like the ocean, and if you're kind of resisting it, you're in a washing machine being tossed around,
hmm
and if you can find a way to just kind of stay calm, it has a force that can float you to new places. And I think part of that staying calm and going with the flow is listening to yourself when you say, you know what, I'm going to need 2 extra minutes in the car,
Yep.
cry a little bit, regroup a little
Yeah.
bit, think about my mom, talk to my mom. And then I'm going to maybe be ready, maybe not be ready, but I'll find out in
Yeah.
5 minutes. And I think that's part of this tightness that we kind of have, especially overachiever types
Yeah.
and people who like to be best and things like that have this framework of okay, well, it's been 3 years, I'm grieving, or 3 months, I'm
Yeah.
whatever, or I'm a professional, I have to go to work. You're first a human and
Yeah.
then a
Yeah.
professional, and so
Yes.
and a daughter, right? So
Right.
these things matter, and so I think giving yourself space for that. And in the same way, modeling this for the people around us, we're
Hmm.
just doing the best we can
Yeah.
as everyone is.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're kind of getting towards the end of the episode, I'm curious if you wouldn't mind going through quickly like each of the four grief personas and just for
Mhm.
each one letting us know like what is one thing you can say or do for that person that would be most helpful.
Absolutely. So I started with the steady hand. That is the logistics person. And my highest recommendation is very ask if can I come mow your lawn? Can I drop off dinner? Can I take the kids to the zoo? Fantastic, right?
Mhm.
And for that person, saying no, that's not really a great time for me too can often sometimes those people can have a hard time saying thanks but no thanks. And I think that is an absolute okay answer. Thanks but no thanks is also fine. So steady hand, really kind of logistics help. The quiet anchor, I think they tend to benefit from, hey, I'm right here. I'll check in with you every so often, but I don't need to show up at your house and tell you, here, let me hold you while you cry in my arms. That person's probably like, thanks,
Yep.
no thanks.
Yeah.
Now the open heart, feel what they're whatever they're putting out. If they're looking like they need the hug and you're open to
Yeah.
it, big hug, big community, checking in on milestones specifically. The open heart, and you mentioned this before we were recording, the open heart, um dates and milestones are a big one for them.
Hmm.
So the first Mother's Day, the first
Yep.
birthday after the anniversary of loss tend to be a really big one for them. And the seeker, I tend to find as someone who's not super anchored in a religion, my best advice for someone who's the seeker, if you're interacting with someone who's the seeker, is just ask questions like,
Yeah.
how has your faith kind of changed, or in how has your faith been part of this for you? If it has,
Yeah.
how has your faith brought peace? How has it maybe asked more questions? Has anything changed in there? And those people, because they tend to be really, really fascinating people, just really
Yeah.
digging into that like life's big question and why are we all here and what is this
Yeah.
anyway? They're right there. They tend to be drawn to that. So
Yeah.
you can get some wisdom and they get a lot. They can often be misunderstood. So they get a lot out of talking about that as well if they're
Yeah.
open to it. So
Yeah.
staying dynamic, but really kind of leaning into each of those can be super validating for the different personas.
Yes. Thank you. All of that was fantastic. And
Good.
it's just interesting because I know, like I said, I tend to be a quiet anchor. And yeah, please don't just show up and start hugging me because especially if I'm like in a okay spot, it's like, why, what's happening? So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. My mom was definitely a seeker too. It's so we all three of us were three
Interesting.
very different people.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's kind of cool when I talk about this. I spent a lot of time thinking, why are we these things? And then
mhm.
in kind of most of these questions, if you think back ages and ages and we were all in a tribe, let's say someone in our tribe died, you do need someone who's a steady hand who's gonna go
Yep.
hunt for dinner.
Yep.
You do need someone who's a quiet anchor who in for the rest of us is kind of modeling what life getting back to normal looks like because they
Yep.
don't look as traumatized. You
Hmm.
need the open heart that really reminds us all, yeah, this one hurt.
Yeah.
This one feels deep. And then you need the seeker, I think, just to say, what are we doing and why?
Yeah.
And so that like what it took me a long time of working in the grief personas to really deeply believe they are all valuable. I knew of them, but as a
Yeah.
steady hand, I'm like, everyone needs a logistics steady hand. But you really deeply need all of them,
Yeah.
and it's really fascinating when we've done surveys now, it's probably over 4,000 people, and only 4% of people are a mix. It really is. People are falling into these buckets of where they lean. And I think it's important. I think it's a big deal on why the conflict exists and how we can show up for each other. So I
Um,
really can't thank you enough for
yeah.
letting me talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited for my listeners to hear this one too. They're gonna
Oh,
like this one. So,
good.
all right. So at the end of my episodes, I have a little tradition where I pull a card from the death deck. Are you familiar with the death deck?
Yes.
So now this season, I'm using the dementia deck because I just got the
Okay,
dementia deck. So I'm going to pull a card at random. I'm going to let you answer
cool.
it, and then I will answer it as well.
Great.
So, oh, this one's nice. All right. Many people living with dementia enjoy recalling stories from their past. A story or event from my earlier years that I would love to revisit throughout my life is.
Oh, I love that one. So when I was a kid, we would go visit this little island off the coast of Rhode Island called Block Island.
Are
And
you
oh, have you
kidding me?
been?
My
Yes, tell
husband's,
me.
yes, I've been to Block Island. My husband grew up in New London, Connecticut.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yes. So Block
Okay.
Island, when I was a kid, was a really special place because we used to bring our dog and we were allowed to basically run amok because there's only so much trouble you can get into on an island. It's like, don't go
Right.
in the water.
Right.
And our dog would just wander around the island. And then, so luckily, my friends from college had a place there. And so I've just been going to Block Island. And if I ever have dementia, I hope I can find myself on Block Island experiencing it for the probably thousandth time. But a special place like that where it's just
Yeah.
far away from mainland and feels like a real escape.
I love that. My husband's mom used to tell them when my husband's the oldest of five, when they were little, that the man that makes the waves lived on Block Island. He makes the waves in the.
Sweet.
I
Yeah.
know.
It's a special
Okay, that's
spot.
so funny because nobody else has ever heard of Block Island.
I know.
All right. So for me, gosh, there's so many. Like anyone, we used to travel a bit when I was growing up, but we always went camping. Like it was just so magical. But honestly, my husband and I back in 2022 took a month and we hiked the Long Trail of Vermont, which is a trail that goes the entire length of the state.
Hmm.
And that was probably like one of the greatest things I've done. And I've been back to Vermont twice since then, and I love reliving that. It's amazing. So probably my hike of the Long Trail.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I
Yeah.
know.
It's wonderful.
Oh, Sarah, this has been amazing, and I knew it would be.
Of course.
Um, I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Please tell my listeners where they can find you and anything else you want to tell them about.
Sure. So our website is restfullycare.com. And we also just made griefpersonas.com forwards right to the grief persona part of that.
Oh,
And there's a
nice.
quiz on there. So you can find, if you're unsure, it doesn't resonate with you automatically, you can take the quiz. And then on there, we have a bunch of resources for people navigating loss, for families regrouping after loss, for families planning. And next month, we're having a lunch and learn on how to talk to your parents about end of life and their plans and their preference.
Ooh.
So anything like that. That one was really visiting friends, and we're in our 40s, and you get to this moment where you say, "Oh, how is everything?" And my friends mostly say, "Well, my marriage, my career, and my life in general somehow managed to get through the baby stage of motherhood or parenting, and now I'm just like." I don't know what to do with my parents. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know what they want. I don't know where things stand. I don't know what I should even talk about. And I think there's often a generational difference on how we talk about it. So
Hmm.
we have a clinical psychologist coming on. She's going to talk to us about what actually is appropriate. Maybe some of this is none of your business. Maybe some of
Yeah.
it is. And so
Yeah.
that's another one we're really excited about.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
With my brother's death, my parents suddenly were way more open about talking about because once they
Yeah.
realized, oh God, all these things need done, they were like, we don't want Nikki to have to go through this. So they were really open about their plans, which was
Yeah.
useful when mom died. So we understood what
Yes.
our plans were. So yeah,
Yes. So,
awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being on my show. I cannot thank you enough. This was wonderful.
yeah. Thank you so much. And thanks for anyone who's listening. It really is amazing. So you're the best.
Aw. Another huge shout out and thank you to Sarah. And it's just Restfully. I said Restfully Care. It's just the website is restfullycare.com. You know what I mean. So thank you to Sarah for being patient with me too when I kind of screwed up starting our meeting. It's been a week. Anyway, thank you, Sarah, so much. What a fantastic conversation. I think I'm going to keep your information and have you back sometime. If you enjoyed this episode or any of my episodes, please leave me a 5-star rating and leave a little review on Apple Podcasts if you can. It's a great way to get me boosted up in the algorithm so I can help more people get through their grief. And if you want to support me even more, you could go to patreon.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula. And for as little as $1 a month, you can help me to provide pro bono work out within the community. And lastly, if you have a question for me, I want to do a Q&A episode so bad. So I set up a little website where you can go and record a message and I'll play it on my show. You can stay anonymous if you want. You don't have to give your name, but I will play the recording on the show and answer your questions. So please do that. And if you want to share a story that you have of a loss that you've been through, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find anything and everything at NikkiTheDeathDoula.com regarding me or this podcast. Somewhere on there, you will find it. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in this week again. And remember, as always, your grief is yours. Your feelings are valid. And grief doesn't always have to suck. Good Grief with Nikki the Death Doula is produced by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC in Columbus, Ohio. Nikki the Death Doula LLC is for consulting, education, emotional support, and guidance, and is no way considered a funeral establishment or licensed mental health establishment. Scripts, editing, sound design, literally everything with this podcast is done solely by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC, with the exception of the music. The music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. Licensing information can be found at filmmusic.io.